Hello, everyone. It's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I hope everybody's doing okay tonight, but this evening. We've had a pretty decent day. Today was a treatment day, so I'm relatively tired, but nevertheless, not tired enough to do the news when the news needs to be done, and especially not tired enough to highlight certain things that give me a certain degree of joy and pleasure when I read through those things. First, if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the content through PayPal or Patreon, and the channel has been remonetized for the time being. They demonetize all these videos, and I have to put them back on, but nevertheless, your help for the show is absolutely appreciated. I've said on more than one occasion, I've given advice. And it's advice that nobody ever heeds, but nevertheless, I give it anyway. If you see Aaron Buzzsaw Matei walking down the street and you are a Russiagator or you are not living correct, walk the other way. I have keep doing shows like this where Aaron Matei rips through somebody who's saying nonsense. And here today, we have this gent. This is a professor of political science. And just to give a bit of his bio, because I want you to see who this person is before I even do this story, because I want you to know who I'm talking about. Michael McFaul is an American academic and professor of political science who served as the United States ambassador to Russia between 2012 and 2014, essentially working under Obama. Prior to his nomination to the ambassador position, McFaul worked as the U.S. National Security Council and Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director of the Russia and Eurasian Affairs. In that capacity, he was the architect of the U.S. President Barack Obama's policy on Russia. Great. Now you know who we're talking about. Mr. McFaul, having worked with the Obama administration, you can imagine to some degree has a certain degree of loyalty to the person that he worked for, and as such, is one of these Obama apologists who every so often pops their heads out with varying topics. In this very specific case, the topic that we're talking about are the Saudis. Now, everybody at this point has this awakening and awareness that, oh my God, that's a totalitarian country, and they just murdered a guy. Talking about Jamal Khashoggi. That is true that they just murdered a guy, but let's be honest that the issues with the Saudis didn't just start with the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. They were out there murdering and killing Yemenis, using starvation and disease as a weapon. There are millions of Yemenis that are either food deprived or at risk of starvation because of the siege that Saudi Arabia has embarked on in that country. McFaul is one of these other people who wants to put all of this on Trump and somehow create this distinction between the obsequiousness of the Obama administration to the Saudis to the obsequiousness of the Trump administration. Now, I would agree with him on this, in this one very specific incremental point. Trump seems to be owned by the Saudis. But what's the material difference? If for all intents and purposes, the Saudis are still getting their way, especially from the standpoint of weapons. Take a look at this exchange in between McFaul and Aaron Matei. This exchange ended rather abruptly, and you get McFaul's reasoning at the very end and the last thing that he says because he tells on himself. And it's the most awesomest thing that I saw, that I've seen today. That said, this exchange ends pretty quickly when Aaron Matei just kind of lays it to him all at once. And the brunt of the information that's being deposited on him is too much. And he relents. And he says, "Good day, sir." It's actually pretty funny. Let's take a look at this right here. So he responds to something that Aramate says. Aramate says, he did not play business as usual with the Saudis. That's correct. Obama authorized more weapons to the Saudis than any president ever. To quote the ex-CIA NSC official Bruce Riedel, no president since FDR courted Saudi Arabia as zealously as did Obama. Now, Michael McFaul, professor, this New Yorker piece also mentioned that Saudis hated Obama's stance on the Arab Spring and despised his Iran nuclear deal. You are cherry-picking history with your one quote, sir. Now, the catch here is, I don't care how they feel, I care what they do. And this is kind of the point that Aaron Matei makes in beautiful fashion. Interesting pattern in exchanges tonight with McFaul and B. Rhodes on Obama's record with Saudis. Both cite feelings. Saudis hated and despised relationship Chile, but avoid engaging with the facts that Obama okayed more weapons to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia ever and greenlit its war on Yemen. That's true, by the way. Flat fact. True. Obama administration offered $115 billion in weapon sales to Saudi Arabia. Report. According to a new report, offers of over the 8 years totaled more than any previous administration and were intended to replenish the arsenal after the war in Yemen. Blood-soaked hands. They're trying to whitewash Obama selling all of these weapons to him. Hillary Clinton, in the WikiLeaks thing, gets across that she knows that Saudi Arabia was spreading terrorism all throughout the Middle East. It didn't stop her from taking their money. Didn't stop her from taking that money. It didn't stop her from approving those weapon sales, nor did it stop the president of the United States from approving billions of dollars in weapons. And we haven't even gotten to the war in Yemen yet. The Obama administration has offered to sell $115 billion worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia over its 8 years in office, more than any previous U.S. administration, according to a new report. The surge in sales is in part to reassure the Saudi monarch of the United States backing in the wake of last year's nuclear deal with Tehran, which raised fears in the Gulf that Washington would tilt more towards Tehran in its foreign policy. The report author, essentially, we're giving you billions of dollars in weapons just so you know that we're still on your side. We're still boys. We're still buddies. Yes, you're a totalitarian country. Yes, you chop off heads. Yes, you chop off hands. Yes, you crucify other human beings. Yes, you have a repressive regime where the weight of the state is bent onto the society itself, and you use our weapons and the money from the oil that you get the petrodollar in order to repress and spread terrorism throughout the region. But we're still boys. We're still buddies. The report authored, William Hartung of the Center for International Policy, said another factor was a drive for the U.S. arm manufacturers to boost sales to compensate for declining procurement by the Pentagon. Listen to that. Essentially, we want them to buy more of our weapons because the Pentagon didn't buy as many weapons as they thought they were going to buy for the weapons industry. That's great. However, most recent deals, such as the offer to sell more than 150 M1A2 Abrams battle tanks for an estimated $1.15 billion, were principally intended to replenish the Saudis' arsenal depleted in the war in Yemen. They've been murdering Yemenis and starving Yemenis. They've been bombing civilians wholesale. And this was under the Obama administration, even though they try to make it look as if it was only under Trump. I think that though the Obama administration is not thrilled about the Yemen episode, it feels it can stay out of it because it needs to reassure the Saudis. How do you stay out of it when you're selling them weapons? You're in it if you're selling them weapons. Not to mention assisting them in their bombings and their attacks on Yemen. Let's keep going. Obama continued decades-long practice of selling arms to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia Maybe a mistake. Agreed. Good. I'm glad you agree. Please send me a link to your pieces denouncing this at the time. What is the evidence that Obama green-lighted the Yemen war? Saudis more independent than you suggest. Oh, you need to be careful with this. From the standpoint of an argument, if you ask the person a question, you better be damn sure that the person can't answer. Meaning, if I'm asking you a question, I'm asking you a question because I already know the answer. Because if you answer in a way that I don't necessarily anticipate, you can make me look like an asshole. Talking to goddamn Buzzsaw, Matei. Here's the New York Times reported the internal White House deliberations after the Saudis for the U.S. support. Right here, this article. Quiet Saudi support for Saudis entangles the U.S. and Yemen. He wanted to know, where did the Obama administration greenlight it? He thought Aaron Matei just kind of made that up. Iran had moved into Saudi Arabia's backyard, Mr. Jubeir told Mr. Obama's senior advisors, and was aiding the rebels in Yemen who had overrun the country's capital and were trying to set up a ballistic missile sites in range of Saudi cities. Saudi Arabia and its Persian Gulf allies or neighbors were poised to begin a campaign in support of Yemen's impotent government. An offensive, Mr. Jubeir said, could be relatively swift. War's always in by Christmas. You never knew that? Have you ever heard that saying? It'll be over by Christmas. It'll be over by Christmas. Every war that has ever been taken place, it'll be over with by Christmas. I love this. 2 days of discussions in the West Wing followed, but there was little real debate. Among other reasons, the White House needed to placate the Saudis as the administration complete a nuclear deal with Iran, Saudi Arabia's arch enemy. That fact alone eclipsed other concerns among many of the president's advisors, and a Saudi-led offensive would be long, bloody, and indecisive. Mr. Obama soon gave his approval for the Pentagon to support the impending military campaign. In other words, green lit. A year later, the war had been a humanitarian disaster for Yemen, and a study in the pearls of the Obama administration pushed to get the Middle East countries to take a bigger military role in their neighborhood. Thousands of Yemeni civilians have been killed, many by Saudi jets flying too high to accurately deliver the bombs to their targets. Peace talks have been stalled for months. American spy agencies have concluded that the Yemeni branch of the Al-Qaeda has only grown more powerful in the chaos. That's called a failure. That's called a foreign policy disaster. That's what that's called. When Aaron Matei said the Obama administration greenlit the war, don't believe Aaron Matei. You can believe the reporting of the New York Times. What's the response here? Seeing as he asked the question, Aaron Matei answered the question. Here's more. Number 2. In terms of my pieces, I wasn't writing then, but I was hosting and producing segments on Democracy Now! Where we covered Yemen extensively. Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3. From bad to worse, hundreds dead, 100,000 displaced as Saudis, and you can go from there. Murder, kill, starve, etc. with the green light of the Obama administration. Call it what it is. Chopping heads, chopping hands, crucifixions, repressive regime. Aaron Matei nails him on this. Completely nails him on this. What does Apologist say? And so delighted that we on the left are arguing, it's not we, it's not we, it's not we. This is not a situation of we. This is you. You are being an apologist and trying to rewrite the history of the Obama administration's relationship with Saudi Arabia in order to use it as a pivot to attack Donald Trump. Call it what it is. This is not we. This is not we. Bunch of Democrats. I'm not a Democrat. And so delighted that we on the left are arguing about Obama's evil ways 2 weeks before the most important election day. What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? We should rewrite, whitewash Obama's role and failures in the Middle East, supporting dictatorial, totalitarian regimes in their wars where he knew before he approved those weapons, he knew what those weapons were going to be used for. He did it anyway. And your role in this conversation is to try to whitewash it, and he cut through you. How embarrassing it is to be you right now. How embarrassing. Professor McFaul, professor of political science that just got his ass handed to him by Buzzsaw Aaron Matei. 2 weeks before the most important election day of my life. Typical and tragic. Good night. No, the tragic part is the rewrite. That's the tragedy of this, whether you realize it or not. That's the tragedy. Aaron Matei, I see this as constructive and I appreciate it. Good night. And knowing Aaron Matei from watching him on Real News Network, he probably has that sideways smirk. I can't reproduce it. As he writes and types it, knowing that he's done God's work. I don't care if there is an election that's coming up. Fact of the matter is, I've never liked, at the very least in my political awareness, us selling weapons to a totalitarian country. And in selling weapons to those countries, he knew what those weapons were going to be used for. And in knowing what those weapons was going to be used for, your response to this is, there's an election coming up, and we need to have this focus on Trump. And so if you're bringing up the relationship that the Democratic Party also has with Saudi Arabia, it weakens our ability to make the case that Trump and Saudis is this kind of bad thing that somehow just magically happened. No, the relationship between Obama and the Saudis was just as bad. Maybe not to the 10, but damn sure 9.5. And you can make the argument that that 0.5 doesn't matter. And I would make that argument that that 0.5 doesn't matter, especially to the Saudis who've lost their mothers and brothers and sisters and the children that have died from the bombings and the weapons that the Obama administration greenlit. Once again, good job, Aaron Matei. More episodes in the Buzzsaw Chronicles where Aaron Matei completely humiliates an apologist. Let's see who's here. I turned down a $120 an hour job building infrared sensors to heat-seeking missiles. I knew where my bombs would have designed to go. You, sir, are an amazing human being for doing that, because most people would have never done that. They would have looked at it's just a job. Jack Fresco used to say that as an engineer, when he was working for the military, he told him, he says, look, I can build you X, but I can't build you Y. Not because he didn't have the technical acumen to do it, but because as a rational human being, if you know that what you're doing is going to end up in pursuit of killing and murdering and maiming and blowing to pieces, then you, to some degree, is responsible. It is not just, I am working a job. Yes, you're working a job, and yes, you need to live, but the works of that job has consequences that goes beyond just what you're toiling away at. Congratulations to you. You're a fucking awesome human being. Desecration the philosopher. You're against selling weapons to Saudis. Yes. Why do you have freedom, Jamal? I have no idea what that means. Trudy. Obama. Let's see. Obama sucked bigly. Trump is worse. Each one is worse than the last. Trudy agreed. Agreed. John Doe. Trump continued to terrorist legacy of all the previous presidents, for sure, yes, but Obama ran on hope and change. Right. Trump didn't run on hope and change. Trump ran on anger and resentment. But to run on anger and resentment and then to turn around and sell weapons. The guy got a Nobel Peace Prize. Those weapons that he sold are out there murdering Yemenis. Yeah. David T., respect creative experiments. Respect indeed, man. Respect indeed. Hoping for change so I can eat. Hoping for change so I can eat. All right. I'm not going to keep this one long. I want this one to be relatively quick. Buzzsaw Aaron Matei, man. When Aaron Matei, when Real News Network, when I first started watching Real News Network, Paul J., for whatever reason, comes across as such a newsman that I can't help but love the guy. And Aaron Matei, I think I was not one way or the other about him, but I have developed a fondness for him where I find this to be this kind of ongoing chronicles, like he's some, like Cain roaming the planet looking for people to kick in the face. But in this case, with factual information. Like, this wasn't him just making stuff up. This was him pinning somebody who was trying to whitewash the previous administration in order to use it as a pivot to attack the current administration. I would agree with him that the current administration is pretty horrendous, but that doesn't necessarily change the actions of the previous administration. Both can be true. This idea of the election being the end-all be-all and that the only focus needed to be on Trump and that we, as the left, are somehow on the same side is nonsense. If we were on the same side, Obama wouldn't have set himself on fire to protect the banks. 95% of the wealth went to the top 1%. And yeah, those weapons wouldn't have been sold to Saudi Arabia. We would have had a redefinition of the relationship with Saudis. Just saying. Both can be true. Donald Trump can be pretty fucking horrendous. And yes, the previous administration was just as obsequious to the Saudis as the current one. Maybe by a factor of 0.5% on this kind of mythical scale of 1 to 10. 9.5 is just as bad. And again, if you're one of the Yemenis that no longer exist, if you're one of the Yemenis that were displaced, if you're one of the people who were being placated and killed by those weapons, then I don't think that 0.5 matters. Aaron Buzzsaw Mate. Keep kicking ass, man. I'll end it here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the Patreon. One day he will decide to come on this show. God, I want him on this show so bad. I want him on the show more so to talk. There's certain topics that come up that I require somebody else that has more extensive knowledge than I do, because I would want, there's certain doors that I don't know. Like it's like a man has to be aware of his limitations. A man needs to also be aware of the shit that he doesn't know what you don't know. I would love for him to come on the show. At some point, I would be big enough for him to come on. Not there yet, but I'll keep bugging him. Thanks all.